communication, which sounds so boring, but let me unpack that a little bit, because communication with a sexual partner is essential, because you need to tell your partner what you know and what you don't know. You need to tell them what you need and what you don't need, what you like and what you don't like. You can't suffer through. You're not there to pleasure somebody. You're there to back and forth. It's both be sharing. There's nothing that someone wants to do more is to pleasure their partner. And that goes both ways, and to be pleasured.
Season 3 of the Plant Strong podcast explores those Galileo moments where you seek to understand the real truth around your health and dare to see the world through a different lens. This season, we honor those courageous seekers who are paving the way for you and me. So grab your telescope, point it towards your future, and let's get plant strong together. Buckle your seatbelt, my Plant Strong friends, for this episode of the Plant Strong podcast. This is another episode with my razzle dazzle sister, Jane Esselstyn. Now, many of you may know Jane as a very charismatic and energetic voice in the plant-based space, especially alongside my mother, Ann, in their very fun YouTube cooking channel. What you may not know is that she is also a registered nurse who uses her charisma and passion to teach, of all the crazy things, sex education to middle schoolers. Now, Jane is an advocate for helping both kids and adults understand that part of being a healthy grown-up should include a healthy sex life. And I know it can be awkward to talk about these things, and that is why Jane really shines here. She uses a healthy dose of empathy, compassion, and humor to talk about these subjects that both teens and adults alike are often too embarrassed to talk about. Well, today we're going to go there. The birds and the bees, the twigs and the berries. We're going to discuss anatomy and the keys to a plant strong, positive, healthy sex life. You'll even learn what the acronym CUVA means. We also take several questions from members of our Plant Strong community. And yes, we do use many of the clinical anatomical words because, as you'll find out today, one of the components of a healthy sex life is communication. So let's start talking about it. A plant strong life has many benefits above and below the belt. And a strong sex life should absolutely be one of them. Welcome, Jane Esselstyn.
Jane, it's almost like Madonna. You don't even have to say the last name. It's just Jane, right?
Oh, God.
Jane. But we're going to explore something today that we don't typically explore. We explored it a little bit on season 1 with Aaron Spitz.
Who is the best. He's the best.
He's great. And we talked about men's sexual health and ED and that amazing iconic scene in the Game Changers with the 3 collegiate athletes. But Jane, you've, outside of doing everything you do with all the cookbooks and your cooking, what I think people don't realize is that you also have a number of other talents and spectacular lectures that you give. One is plant-based or plant strong below the belt, right?
Above and below the belt.
Above and below the belt. Okay, yeah. I think we're going to focus below the belt today. And I think it's appropriate because to me, sexual education, sexual health, it's a topic that is off the table for a lot of American families, which is unfortunate because I think parents, either they don't know how, they don't know where to begin, they don't do a great job talking about sexual wellness. And it's such an important part of our overall, who we are as human beings and our health. And you've done such a phenomenal job, I think, connecting the dots between sex and plant-based nutrition. And even before that, you, for whatever reason, had an a knack to go into sex education. And it's something that you've been teaching to grade schoolers now for how long?
Well, middle school, yeah. Since, oh my God, Rip, since 1990-ish.
1990.
So for like 30 years and in different capacities for 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes just limping along one class, one spring.
Well,
But yeah, 30, long time.
And I can't imagine all the spectacular things that you've taught these children and the amazing questions that they've asked you that I'd love to explore a little bit today. But, I'll speak for a man. For men, it's amazing. I'm bumping up against 60. I'm 58. And I will proudly exclaim that I have no erectile dysfunction issues whatsoever, right?
Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. But it's not the same for a lot of my friends that are in their 40s and their 50s. And I don't think it's a psychological issue as much as it's a physiological issue. And as the saying that Terry Mason coined, and I think it was in Forks Over Knives, the canary in the coal mine for coronary artery disease is ED, right? And so
it's the canary in the trousers.
Thank you. And then with women,
I think that was his term. It wasn't my term. That was someone else's term, but canary in the trousers nails it.
But then with women, I don't know what the equivalent is because it's not quite as obvious. Maybe it's the lack of vaginal secretions or sexual appetite. I don't know, but maybe we can talk about that as well today, which I'd love to jump into. But for starters, I want to start with this because this is season 3. Our theme is, we're really highlighting trailblazers and courageous kind of pioneers who have paved the way, but they've done it because they had a Galileo moment, something that kind of solidified their resolve to go down this whole food, plant-based path. And I'm wondering for you, was there one thing in particular or was it like a multitude of things?
I mean, heck, you and I, we had kind of had the similar stories. Like, mommy and daddy were going down that road and it made so much sense. And it felt good in our bodies because we were all actually, fortuitously, we were all athletes and athletic at the time. And it kind of kept us in this level of fitness in body and identity at the same time. So that was really kind of cool. And I just stuck with it because it was easy to eat that way, kind of when you're around it. And once you do it, it's so easy. I mean, you and I know we couldn't keep up eating this way if it wasn't easy. And then luckily I married a vegetarian. And I swear, I don't think I would have married Brian if he wasn't vegetarian. It would have been too much work to try to, get him on board. It's so bad to say. And it just continued being easy. And my memory is you never were a fan of meat. And even when we were, oh gosh, yeah.
Like even when we were maybe, 10, 11, 12, 13, we would go to McDonald's. I shudder to say this out loud, but we would go to McDonald's or Burger King and you would take the meat out of the bun and you would just eat the bun.
Yeah. You know what I actually remember viscerally is that we used to go to those places sometimes. I mean, very occasionally, but I remember styrofoam was kind of part of what they package things in. And I remember going to Burger King and thinking like, I can't stand hamburgers. I can't stand the meat, but I'll get a hot dog. And they came in those like styrofoam hot dog shape, but like a little mini coffin. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that kind of shape. And I remember secretly hiding the hot dog in the container and taking the straw from someone's drink and putting it on the end and pretending I was talking on the phone with someone. So mommy wouldn't check where my meat was. And she thought I was eating it, but I was hiding it in the fake phone.
Wait,
I remember
but they didn't have cell phones back then, did they?
No, but I pretended to make it into like a little phone. Like, I mean, I remember making like a walkie-talkie, it was probably walkie-talkie, you're right.
Okay.
Walkie-talkie thing, like an antenna thingy. And I remember thinking, this is so clever how I'm hiding it in this little mini container coffin thing.
Yep.
Yeah. I did not like meat growing up, which is so random, but I guess kind of lucky.
Yeah. Okay. So for you, it was easy. You were kind of pulled along, and you were never a fan of meat. So it just made a lot of sense. Now let's dive into sex ed. So you've been teaching sex ed in some form or another for over 30 years. What do you think was it that drew you to being a sex ed teacher?
That's such an interesting question, especially to talk to you and like maybe Ted and Zeb, our other siblings, about it. Like, I had 3 brothers growing up, and it was such a blast a lot of the time, but it was during the puberty years pretty lonely. Like, you guys would all be like doing pull-ups and, cock-a-doodle-doodling around and kind of playing basketball and just doing your things. Not that you didn't ever include me and all that stuff, but I remember thinking, like, this is this girl thing. I'm fine being a girl. I'm fine with all that, but this is all new and weird, and no one else is going through this stuff. Anyway, that all made me feel a little bit like I wish I had someone to bounce some of these questions off of, but having, oddly, mommy, who is just, she's just a, shot out of a cannon with, well, let's talk about periods today at dinner. And I'd be like, oh my God, really? So she, mommy would talk about anything and bring anything up. And then there's daddy, who's got the medical, sort of the calm, clear, medical, reasonable, sort of almost like anthropological, like, hey, this all makes such good sense. And this is a good sign of health. And anyway, they were interesting, enthusiastic, and medical interpretation of all this like emotional stuff that I was kind of doing alone. So I think I felt anchored in mommy's enthusiasm and comfort and her just ability to not shock, but she'll just take anything head on. And then daddy's capacity to sort of understand and analyze and figure out stuff. So I think way back when, this is almost like therapy. That may have been where I gravitated towards understanding what's happening with bodies and why it's happening to bodies. And yeah, there's emotional stuff going on, but it's okay. And let's talk about it because it'll only help. And then jump forward to when I was in my early 20s, I was applying to medical schools, and that's a year-long process. When you take the MCAT and you apply and all this stuff. So during that year of applying, one of our neighbors, Roberta, she taught at this all-girls school, Halfway Brown, and she said, Jane, I have to go out of town for a full week. So I think a family member was sick out of the country, and she was going to be gone for good 7 days of teaching or more. And she said, would you ever take over my health class? It's a sex ed week. Would you mind? And I was like, I'll take it on. And I'm thinking, I'm applying to medical school. This should be part of my jam. Here we go. And sure enough, I went in and taught for the week, and it was a blast. And Roberta came back and she said, Jane, you've done such a great job. Would you mind taking over for the rest of the year while you're waiting for applications? And I was like, oh my God, no problem. And then I got so involved in teaching, I then medical school didn't work out. I've got, interview here or this there and a nibble there, but never worked out, which is probably for the best. And I ended up teaching biology and sex ed, and that's the rest of the story.
So did you know any other families that you grew up with that you felt were as open in talking about sex ed, sex health, all that stuff?
You know what? I think most people end up coming to our house and sitting around our lazy Susan table and talking with us about that stuff, because I think we actually had this weird blend of, these 3 boys, you guys, and, one daughter. So the conversation leaned more towards that jocularity that boys have around, hey, like their junk, their stuff, everything literally is more out there and exposed and to be played with verbally, you know, and also below the belt. Boys have more of a tendency to do that than females and girls do, unless you have a whole bunch of girls. If there were 3 girls in our family and 1 boy, then the conversation would have maybe not been, depending on the tone, but, you know, not been as much outwardly, unless we were a great gang of gals. But it is something that for some reason our culture is not, does not like to take it head on. I mean, there's so many adult reasons behind that, which I think are actually sort of sad. You know, religion, which there's no doctrine that dictates you should not discuss anatomy and, you know, the function of one's body with your kids, as far as I know. And there's fear around it. And I think it's actually so empowering to take that fear head on and discuss these things. There's nothing more true than it's awkward. It is awkward. But once you get in there, you've got such freedom and range to talk about with your kids, with your family, with your partner, with your students, if that's what the class is about. And it's so liberating.
We'll be right back with Jane. But first, I want to talk about cooking with ease. If you know anything about my family, you know that we love to cook simple, Plant Strong meals. And I want to virtually invite you right into our kitchen with the Plant Strong Meal Planner. So many of my family's favorite recipes are right there for you to make for your own families, or even make together like we do. Earlier this year, we launched a special promotion, and we've been really surprised at how much you've enjoyed it. For the first time, we offered a 14-day free trial to test drive our Plant Strong Meal Planner so that you can come in and really kick the tires before deciding if it's right for you. Exciting news, we're bringing it back so more of you can take advantage. Simply visit mealplanner.plantstrong.com today and enter the code STARTFRESH to redeem your 2-week trial. Check out the database filled with hundreds of recipes, see instructional cooking videos, make and save personal menus, and shop using our adaptive grocery list. You can even load and save your own recipes so this meal planner becomes your wingman or wing woman in the kitchen, saving you loads of time and ensuring you use up all those vegetables. Again, free trial for the first time, and for a limited time, go to the show notes or visit mealplanner.plantstrong.com and enter the code STARTFRESH. Yes, you have to enter a credit card, but you won't be charged if you cancel before the trial ends, and that's simply a click of a button. Enjoy the test drive and get cooking. Now, let's get back to my conversation with Jane.
Yeah. So as a sex ed teacher, what did you learn about talking about, you know, these awkward subjects? And what was the reaction of your students?
Oh, well, you know, I guess just knowing that your class is going to be awkward for the kids, I put on my mommy thinking cap and you go right into it. And so whenever I start a class with kids, I say, you guys, you know, my name is Ms. Esselstyn, and that, you know, they struggle with that name for the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
More with the Ms. aspect than the Esselstyn aspect. But I said, you guys, I'm here because I really want you guys all to have positive, healthy sex lives. And they all kind of go, oh, okay. So they can kind of just starting from there saying, I want you to have this positive, healthy sex life, because and the energy I try to put out there is like, one of the coolest things in life is to be like authentically human, which means that you can do so many things. Like, you know, you can think and you can move and you can be athletic and all these things, but we also have this beautiful part of ourselves that we've been given. That's this sexual part of ourselves. And to have it be a positive, healthy part of your identity when you are ready to engage in that part of your identity is great. It's so great. And you share it with someone. So
yeah,
to hinder that and just to destroy the beauty of what that is, this authenticity and this vitality. It's it's something that I hope that I always say, like, and later on in life, like I want them to know that you're still a 6th, 7th, 8th grader. You've got ways to go.
Yeah, but I think that's perfect. Setting the stage by letting them know, listen, my goal here is to give you guys, teach you what it means to have a healthy, positive sex life. I mean, what more could you ask for, right?
And parents cannot argue with that. And parents
No.
are sometimes a sticky wicket.
Yeah. Can you remember, like, what were some of the great questions that you've gotten over the years that really, like, you can't ever forget?
How do testicles fit inside the condom? It looks like it would hurt. Just kids ask these questions that you're like, oh, you poor dear. This is, from an adult perspective, hilarious that you want to stuff testicles into a condom, but they don't know. And I'm like, that is such a great question. Yeah. One kid, Miss Esselstyn, I have a question about fallopian pubes. And I'm like, I can't wait to hear your question, but let me just clear up one thing. Fallopian tubes are one thing and pubes are another thing. So you actually get 2 questions with me today. And he's like, oh, great. Okay. And they went on to ask.
Well, obviously there are pubes in the fallopian tubes. So I get that.
Oh, no, there's not. Oh, no. So the questions are hilarious. And, you talk about all this stuff with arousal, but, women don't have penises. And I'm like, yeah, great question. I'm so glad you point that out. Let's talk about what women do have. And, then the kids are like, what? Anyway.
Well, so let me ask you that. So would it be the same thing for adults to have a healthy, positive sexual life? I mean, if you were going to teach a sex ed class to adults, right, let's say over the age of 40, like, what are 3 topics that you want to discuss?
I'm so glad you asked that, because so often after I give these presentations to parents, the line to talk at the end is insane.
Yeah.
And it ranges from, just saying thank you. Occasionally you have people who are critical, and but people who are basically say, hey, could we have a sex ed class and cocktail hour with you? It would be a riot and we'd learn a ton. There's no other way we'd be able to swallow all the information, but could we do that? And so I was like, oh yeah, how great. So, but the 3 things that I would love that I would include if I was teaching a sex ed class to adults would be so flippin' similar to what I teach if I only had 3 classes to teach to kids.
Oh, okay. What
would be? The first one would be communication, which sounds so boring, but let me unpack that a little bit, because communication with a sexual partner is essential. Because if you're 14 years old, if you're 104 years old, you need to tell your partner what you know and what you don't know. You need to tell them what you need and what you don't need, what you like and what you don't like. You can't suffer through. You're not there to pleasure somebody. You're there to back and forth. It's both be shared. There's nothing that someone wants to do more is to pleasure their partner. And that goes both ways, and to be pleasured. And from the beginning, to know that it's this yin yang, this balance between you and your partner, sharing that pleasure, that's key. So communicating about what you know and what you don't know, communicate about what you like and don't like, and to be humble about it. Again, this is completely awkward. But if you are there with someone, kissing faces or, partially naked or fully naked, you're already totally awkward. So keep going with it. And it only gets better, and your heart gets stronger and more open and just more beautiful when you share that stuff. So communication.
Well, can I chime in there? Because I do think that, you're spot on there with communication, and, intimacy, sexual intimacy. If you don't feel close to your partner, that sexual intimacy is going to be difficult to come by, and you're going to want to stay away from it with a 10-foot pole. So it's almost like you need to have the communication, you need to be clicking, you need to feel connected. Otherwise, sex is probably not going to be on the horizon. And I can't tell you how many people I know that have said, you know what, it's sad, but I haven't had sex with my wife but 2 times this year, or, you know, we haven't had sex in years, and it's crazy.
Well, yeah, and I completely hear you. And I was going to get there in my adult air quotes adult sex class here. No, and you have to have that emotional connection, and that's something that I know. You know, we've got, as you know, Rip, we've got 3 teenage to early 20-year-olds, and they have grown up around all this discussion, all this narrative about you have to have an emotional connection, or this sexual experience is completely empty. And you can like maybe check something off a list. Oh, I've kissed somebody. But if you kiss somebody you didn't like, then you just went through with it may have been your pillowcase, you know? So having an emotional connection makes it such a richer experience, no matter, again, if you're 15 or 14, 14 or 104. So the other thing is understanding what touching is, or what contact is, because there's different ways of touching people. Like there's the whole puppy pile idea, like growing up with like 3 brothers and you guys were constantly physical with each other. I mean, you guys were always fighting in the backyard, but it was like this puppy pile of just physicality, which our bodies we seek. Like we have a dog, and if we're sitting on the ground, he comes over and he sits upon us and just slides down our side, because that's it's like the way that he plays or hugs, or he's hey, you're part of my tribe. It's not sexual. It's a puppy pile of just contact, which makes you feel like you're a part of a tribe. It's a very sort of root chakra kind of thing. And then the other kinds of touch, which is like, there's massage is different. Massage is a physical sort of a therapeutic touch. You know, if you've been massaged, you know, it's someone pushing the stress out of your body. And then of course there's like the parental touch, which is the slow, tender, like brushing the hair off the brow, and just which is neurologically just soothing, and you're safe, and this light contact, you can actually fall asleep because you can rest and digest and go to sleep because everything's fine, and your parent is brushing your brow, kind of light touch. And then there's sexual touch, and we all hear that drumbeat and feel it, and it's something completely different. So for people, you and your partner, or someone who you're married to, or you're committed with, to have daily touch, even if it's not on that drumbeat underneath, but physical touch is something that keeps you connected in a physical way, and keeps things open to going through all those different kinds of touch, open to the sexual touch. That's really
impressive, and I love that. Almost like the different levels of touch, and
we're all wired for neurologically.
Yeah. And how, if you can't go from, like, if the sexual touch is number 7, let's just say there's 7 levels, or 5, I can't remember how many you said. 4. You can't just go from 0 to.
You like the number 7 a little too much with your 7 different.
I do.
There were 4 different ones. There's probably a million. There's probably a million different touches, but
there probably are. But let's just say there's 7. You can't just go from 0 to 7. You can, but you know what? It's going to be difficult, and it's probably not. So I think you work on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it makes 7 that much more just kind of natural, and it just kind of flows. But anyway, I like that a lot.
Yeah. So daily touch is a huge part of it. And then another part that I think, and this is kind of speaking a little more to males, and I do, but I also want to speak about females after this, but in males, and to some degree females, this is really trying to not have pornography be a part of it. It's not a reliable teacher, and it actually can help. It actually can sadly have people develop erectile dysfunction, and something called PIED, which is porn-induced erectile dysfunction. And it is a real thing. And since it's as new as the internet is, we don't have a ton of research, because it's about this sad topic for people to discuss and to share and disclose about. But what happens is, people over the age of like roughly 26 to 30 or so, people who didn't grow up necessarily with the internet, they can get over, they can heal, if you will, from or come back from this PIED, this porn-induced erectile dysfunction, because their innermost wiring was not raised on porn. But people who are under 26, they're young, healthy males, but they need to have, like, it's almost like alcoholism. They need to just refrain from pornography for like 4, 5, 6 months to get the dopamine, the rewiring in their brain come back from this erectile dysfunction situation. So porn is not going to go away. I'm not saying no porn, but I'm saying do your darndest to, like, tell your kids, tell yourself, tell your friends, tell your buddies, tell your cousin, anybody who's in a relationship with a male, your partner, no matter who you're with, share with them that porn is not going to help them be a better lover, partner, because it is oftentimes has expectations for your partner and yourself that are not realistic. It does things that are actually harmful and hurtful to their partner, heterosexual and often in gay pornography. So it's a rough topic to talk about, but I talk about it with all my 6th, 7th, 8th graders. So I'm totally going to share it with you guys that avoiding porn as much as you can is only going to help your sex life.
Jane, I love those 3 little pieces of advice: communication, touch, right? The different levels of touch, and then lastly, basically put the kibosh on the porn.
Because I didn't talk about women yet, though. I didn't.
Okay.
And one thing that I learned in teaching middle school sex ed has been really effective, and shockingly, it's landed with such appreciation with adults, is when I would talk about anatomy and stuff with kids. Everyone gets the bat and the balls and the twigs, the berries and the boys and the below the belt stuff, and they're laughing and cajoling and with all that stuff. And having, again, 3 brothers, I'm so familiar with all that. Just it's all good, funny, goofy energy around it, especially in the middle school years, for goodness sake. And then I would say, okay, great, we're finishing up with the male anatomy. We're going to start the female anatomy now. And as soon as we started the female anatomy, it would be like crickets. And you have this symbol on the board of, like, the uterus and the fallopian tubes and the ovaries, and everyone's like looking at them wide-eyed, quiet, thinking, where the heck is that? There's pleasure there? That's fun. Where is it? Where do girls keep that thing? Where can you see it? Like, and the girls would be like, I have no idea where that is. Like, they, maybe some kids obviously did, but so I've realized we need to talk about female anatomy completely differently. We need to turn them sideways and sort of cross section, cut it in half. So I put this, I would draw my own horrible drawing. I'm not a great drawer, but I'm a confident drawer. So I draw my male anatomy stuff too, which is always, that's too big, that's too small, that's too pointy, that's too skinny, that's too big. They had the funniest comments about my anatomy. I loved it. I don't care, just as long as they're looking at it. The drawing, that is. So my female anatomy on the board in side view, I would say, okay, in the back here, in the bottom, there's a hole that starts with an A, and they'd be like, what? Like, what starts with an A back here? Women and men both have it. Girls and boys both have it. We all need it. If we didn't poop, we'd die. Where does our poop come out of? And they're like, oh my God, anus. So yeah, anus. So in front of the anus, there's another hole, and this hole is this is the reproductive hole for women, and it starts with a V, and this is the vagina. This is where three big things happen in a female's lifetime if she chooses. Well, not always if she chooses, but this is where she has her period, where her, when her menstruation starts, this is where it comes out of, because above here is the uterus where the baby grows. And if she chooses to have sexual intercourse in her life, this is where the penis is hosted during that act. And this is where baby will come out of if she has a baby one day. So like, those are the 3 things. This reproductive thing it's right here. There's the V. And their kids are like, oh, okay. And then I say, and in front of this, there's another hole, a teeny tiny, teeny weeny hole, non-expandable, tiny, hard to even find hole where she pees from. This is the urethra. So we're going to put a U here for urine, for urethra. And by this time, the 7th grade boys, 8th grade boys are like, wait a minute, she has so many holes. I cannot believe this. How many holes do women have? This is crazy. How many holes do I have? Like, okay, you guys know you have one hole, guys. But the girls having they can, whatever, like boys, they have an anus and then a vagina and the urethra. But then when I come in and say, you guys, there's more, and they're like, no way. Yep, there's one more thing here. And this is 8,000 nerves for sexual pleasure. It's not a hole. It's just a little button, a little bit of tissue here in front. And it's just like the head of the penis. It's the exact same number of nerves, but your whole penis shrunken down into like a concentrated button right here. And it's called the clitoris or the clitoris or the clit, whatever you want to call it. And so the letters I've spelled out in front of you are for you here. I usually have a visual aid, but I know this is a podcast. So it spells out CUVA, clitoris, urethra, vagina, anus. And the order of events, if you will, on a female's body from front to back, CUVA has always been my way of talking about female anatomy with the middle school students. And I do it whenever I can talk to adults and talk about even plant-based stuff. I always get CUVA in there somehow. I will always wedge it in there because
it's practically your nickname is CUVA.
Love it. Yeah, t-shirts are available.
Don't you have CUVA t-shirts? Exactly.
Yeah. And,
now, are those for men? Are those in men and women's sizes, or just?
I've only had one man order a CUVA t-shirt, and he was Canadian. Bless his Canadian heart. I remember him. He was great.
I'd wear one very proudly. I need to get one.
People think it's like the Cleveland United Vegetarian Association or something. I'm like, oh yeah. But just the truth is, it's not that. So anyway, so talking about CUVA like that simply lets women, females know, and most importantly, males know that women have the exact same capacity that men do. Like a penis is, for your urination, reproduction, sexual pleasure. Women have the same stuff. We have urination, our urethra, reproduction, vagina, sexual pleasure, clitoris, clit up here in front. And as a sex ed teacher, I would leave that CUVA on the board for as long as I could. So the ink would stain into the whiteboard and you couldn't really erase it. So the CUVA kind of was there the whole few weeks of the sex ed unit. But getting that out as soon as possible was essential because, again, pornography plays this role in making kids think, and kids so young are, they innocently go, what is kissing? What is sex? What is this stuff? And boom, you can't believe what they've seen. It's things they cannot unsee. And it's really troubling, especially if you haven't had the discussion with your kids, like pornography is something that's not, your head and your heart can't handle it. It's out there on the internet. The internet is a tricky landscape. And for a positive, healthy sex life in your own life, you don't want to watch this stuff. You want to just figure out who you are and what you like and what gets you going. So for females or females with males, again, communication about female pleasure is a big sticky wicket because no one has really talked about that. With my middle school kids, I talk about an erection is the form of readiness for a male, and vaginal lubrication is a form of readiness for the female. And everyone has heard of a boner or an erection. No one has talked about or heard about lubrication.
Right.
They haven't heard the word. They don't know. They're like, what is it? What is it? What does it do? What is it? Why? What does it look like? What? All these questions about it.
So can we dive into talking about that?
Oh yeah, that's
okay. So let's so for men, right? Let's say that you're a man and you notice that you're starting to experience some erectile dysfunction. Do you have any suggestions for that man?
Well, like you said in the beginning, Terry Mason's comment that this is the canary in the trousers, and this really could be an indication that there is some vascular disease going on. If you have ruled out that it's not for psychological reasons, job loss or some sort of family issue or whatever, millions of things can happen psychologically, or a neurological issue. People can have pinched nerves and things that they don't know about or that are actually getting in the way. So if you rule out those things, physical and neurological, then yeah, this vascular issue could really be what's going on. And it could be an indicator of something that could happen with their heart. And going on a whole food plant-based diet, we have seen so many people turn that thing around, make that crouching tiger into a hidden dragon.
Yeah.
Making that little, garden worm into the anaconda.
Crouching dragon into a Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yeah. Magic dragon, exactly. I had one kid who said that his uncle was a really fun a fun character in his life, and he would always leave Easter like, I gotta go home because the blood bank's about to open.
Oh, geez.
Joking about like his weird blood flow.
Yeah. So what about women? What about women, and how does that typically present itself in men? If it's ED, how does it present itself in women?
Well, women obviously are different and they're more complicated. I would say more laid out differently, but we are all made of the same Legos. I mean, I always say like men have nipples. Why? Well, because when we're all in utero, we're all given the exact same Legos, and then our gender is chosen. Biological gender is then chosen. So all the things that make up some of the anatomy that we're culturally more familiar with, penis and testicles or scrotum and all that stuff, that same material is what women, females are made up of. Like we mentioned earlier, the head of the penis, the glans, glans, is actually that's the same neurological tissue as the head of the clitoris that sticks out of her body, externally, but internally, the two shafts, there's two sides to the shaft of the penis. They're both called corpus cavernosa, corpus body cavernosa, just, able to expand with blood. And that corpus cavernosa tissue is actually inside a woman. Just imagine if the clitoris inside her body had bunny ears that could grow back, just these two-sided bunny ears that could grow back and hug around the vaginal space. So they're called the crura, which is a strange word to add to the strange language that's unfamiliar with us all down below the belt for her. But the crura is a corpus cavernosa, and it engages with blood flow. So the more she's engaged in intimacy, the more foreplay. Yes, I talk about foreplay with middle school kids because it is so important in their life to understand you don't just go from A to Z. I had one kid describe, I said, you guys, who wants to stab at sexual intercourse? I'll get back to my other thing I'm trying to finish in a second. I had one kid answer, I know what sex is. I can talk about sexual intercourse. He said, it's kiss, kiss, boom, boom. And everyone cracked up. He got so much praise for that. And I was like, you know what? I'm glad you said that. It sounds a little bit like rape or unconsensual activity. And he was like, oh, I said, yeah, because there's so much more that goes on between the kiss and the boom, boom. And he's like, okay, what do you mean? It's like, let's talk about foreplay. He's like, okay, where's foreplay? And it was, one of those great confident kids that just brings the whole class with him. So foreplay was awesome because I said, it's getting the juices going and blood flowing and everybody all over their body so they're ready to go. So in a female, like in a male, it takes a while for the boner to happen, doesn't it? And they're like, oh, well, are we timing things? And I'm like, don't talk to me about timing things. But said for women, the longer she's able to have blood flow go down there and get all this tissue engorged, it actually wraps around the vaginal space because what female lubrication is made up of is plasma and some lady chemicals. And so plasma comes directly from that blood flow. So if all those capillaries, all those little capillaries leading around the vaginal, it's an old term, but the vaginal barrel, the vaginal space, all those tissues can be engorged with blood, and then blood flow and plasma come in and make the lubrication. Hooray, she's ready to go. Some women actually do have issues when they get to menopause with severe vaginal dryness, which needs to be addressed to keep intimacy in her life, and pain in intercourse, if that has pain attached to it. But to tie into that, and I'm going more adult now, is the more you use it, the better. Like if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And the walls, the integrity of the walls, the more they're lubricated, the more they're engaged with blood flow, the healthier that space will be. Not just the pelvic floor, but the vaginal space itself.
How, so how Daddy loves talking about nitric oxide and how it's the great life jacket, vasodilator, life jacket of the blood vessels, or that's the endothelial cells. But so what in your opinion, how does nitric oxide impact sexual health?
Tremendously for him and for her. Him, obviously, you don't want to, raise a soggy flag. You want to raise a flag. You want to, what's that called? Switchblade. You don't want to.
Sure.
All right. So that is a huge help with males, because as soon as that, almost all of the vasculature, I had a long talk with Aaron Spitz. I know you've had him on recently, but
yeah.
I had a long talk with him, And afterwards, we had a great long talk, and he said, "I love your visuals, and I really want you to do this and this." And he had all these like ideas and things. And I was, he said, "You nail it, but it isn't just the penile artery and the penile vein that are expanding, and that because whenever an artery expands, this the vein next to it and below the belt for men, it contracts, so they can't get blood back to the heart. That's why erections happen, because you have vasodilation happening. You've got nitric oxide being released. There you go. You have an erection, but it happens all over the penis, like every single vessel covering the whole thing from stem to stern, from root to tip.
Right.
All that is mini vasculature everywhere. It isn't just one main vein. I mean, yeah, obviously there's a main vein, but there's that, and then where it branches off to in all those little teeny tiny ways that's happening. So that can be affected in such great ways if people go on a whole food plant-based, or a male goes on a whole food plant-based diet because he wants to increase the firmness of his erections. He will have benefits.
Don't you think that'll equally affect the lubrication of women?
It's a little more complicated with women, just because there is what she has her history of pregnancies, deliveries, and things that can because the vagina dilates with every birth, and the vaginal walls there can be a dilation, injuries and things, and so there's different history that lives there because of her fertility history. Yeah. And being sexual is a habit. And again, if you create this habit of being sexual with your partner, it's going to be healthier for you guys physiologically, of course. It's going to be healthy for you guys, in your hearts and your relationship, of course. And it's good for just spirit. Yeah.
What, anecdotally, what are some stories you've heard about men and or women when they start eating a whole food plant-based diet, then turning around their sex life?
Maybe you've heard those, but I've heard great stories about people just saying how, I'll start with men saying how thankful they are for this part of their identity. Men, like anybody, a man wants to be a whole man. He wants to be a whole man. He wants to be able to have an erection. He's identified with it his whole life. It's this thing that it's such a huge part of him and what he can do with it. And I mean, even somebody who hasn't had maybe sexual intercourse for a while probably still wants to have the capacity to do so, or even just give himself pleasure. And for women, it's
before you go on to women, can I add? Because remember, in the Engine 2 cookbook, we have a lot of testimonials from men and women in there, and there was the guy in there that started eating this way, and he'd been eating paleo before that, and he said paleo makes my penis sadio, and this way, oh my God, he was like, Katie, bar the door, watch out. I'm knocking over like lampshades when I get up in the morning. It was awesome.
Share what he said about he could do a push-up with no hands.
The human tripod, I think it was, something like that.
Or just the unipod. He could just do a push-up with no hands because he could hold himself up.
Okay.
Anyway.
So women.
Women, I have gotten the most spectacular testimonials from women. But I want to say, opposite of all these testimonials, I've gotten so many women who are concerned. Like, I have pain, I'm dryness, all this stuff. So just all kinds of good hope that good blood flow will get there, and you stick with it. And also stick with like pelvic floor exercises, because there is so much that goes into female sexual pleasure, and it's not, again, talked about. But there's so many muscles down there. So yes, Kegels, but deep Kegels. So women, we've had women, you actually get the emails too. Like my husband's going to be late for work. I can't get enough of him. My blood flow is just that's all I feel these days. And he's late every day. He's going to lose his job. Yikes. And another woman who was such a dear letter, she was 69 years old, and she had lost 100 pounds eating whole food plant-based. And that was
an Engine 2 person.
Yeah. And she said, yeah, exactly. And she said, I can't get enough. I give my husband lately for the last month. I'm all over him. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But most recently, I loved when I most recently got a woman who is like in her 60s ish, or she's been whole food plant-based for like 3 years. And she hadn't had a sexual partner in this whole, since she started plant-based, but then she did have a partner recently. And she said, oh my God, you need to tell everyone. I mean, you need to tell everyone this, Jane. I just had the most mind-blowing sexual experience. I mean, blood has gotten to these new and exciting places, and I had pleasure over and over and over again. Like, give me more of that over and over again. Like, she had multiple orgasmic, wow, kapow, which I don't think everyone is going to maybe get that brand, but she did. And she has done a ton of work with yoga and whatnot to strengthen her whole body and core and pelvic floor.
Nice. Jane, let's pivot for a sec. I want to ask you some questions from our community. They found out that I was interviewing you today for the podcast, and so
I hope, Rip, you take. I mean, you've have so much exposure to people and their questions, so I hope that you answer some of these as well, because I don't by any means know.
Oh, no. Yeah, let's just answer these together. So this first question is from Elizabeth. She wants to know, Jane, any thoughts on diabetes and sexual health for women?
Well, if she's talking about type 2 diabetes, she will get such great benefits to her addressing a type 2 diabetes for herself or her partner. I don't know who she's talking about.
Let's just say herself. I think it's herself. Yeah.
Okay. Such benefits to her blood sugar and her responsiveness of her cells to her glucose. She'll also get great responsiveness down there as this blood flow can reach all of these, again, new and exciting places. So I think go.
The second half of her question is, Jane, what are your thoughts on me dating at 60 years old?
Hell yeah. Why
Kale,
not?
Kale, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Get after it.
Being sexual is a habit. It's such a beautiful part of who you are, and that we're all allowed to be and go. What was her name?
That was Elizabeth.
Oh yeah, go Elizabeth.
Go Elizabeth. All right, here's a question from Marique, I think is how you pronounce her name. I would be really interested in hearing about plant-based eating and how it helps reduce menstrual symptoms, mood swings, bloating, cramps. And we've got several questions along those lines.
Well, that's a great question, because eating whole food plant-based is great, because then you're only dealing with, your own estrogen load, if you will. If you're eating dairy and meat, you have, not only the meat, which is the body of usually a cow that was full of estrogen when she died after being a dairy cow, or if you're drinking or using dairy in any way, you're actually drinking the breast milk of a cow that was, is filled with estrogen. So when you go on a whole food plant-based diet, you don't have all this other extra estrogen in your body messing up with your own hormones. Plus, you're eating all this high fiber food, so your body gets rid of all this food so much faster. So there's none of these foods that dairy and meat, dairy and meat are not sitting in your intestines, and you're absorbing and reabsorbing all this estrogen that's sitting in your gut for all this time. You're actually pooping it right out. You're just pooping it right out. So you're not over absorbing. And so it really helps steady out some of those symptoms. I mean, you will occasionally get cramps. You will occasionally get heavy flow, but our own brain and body and feedback systems regulate our own cycles, and to make it be as much as possible your own chemistry is best.
Jane, my husband and I are trying to conceive, and we've heard that a plant-based diet may help with that. Can fertility be improved on a whole food plant-based diet?
I would recommend you talk with a plant-based guy, OBGYN for sure. I know, like Rip, our sister-in-law, Ann Bingham, is OBGYN, and she just spoke at my conference 2 days ago, and She was all about this. Just yes, fiber-filled food helps everything be supple and open and not inflamed. And you want to be as supple and open and not inflamed as possible if you're trying to conceive. And sometimes women have these things called fibroids. I know we have hemorrhoids and we have steroids, all these things, but fibroids are a different thing. Fibroids tend to grow inside a woman's uterus. You know, every month we have this beautiful layer that proliferates of this beautiful nest of tissue and blood that's just like, hey, we're gonna have a party, we're gonna grow a baby, yay, we're all these decorations is puffy, puffy, puffy blood and tissue. And then the month comes around and there's no sperm, thank goodness. And I'm saying for like the middle school kids, and the party ends and all the stuff flows out. Sometimes in females, as we get older, and if we've had a lot of dairy and things that cause fibroids or just thickening of all this tissue, they grow down like stalactites. They grow like those cave, those drippings in caves, and they end up blocking the uterus or having the uterus feel like there's some intruder in there and you can't get pregnant. So you want to get those fibroids, to go away. And whole food plant-based diet, many people have had success with reversing fibroid issues and having those clear up. So I don't know if that's an issue with you, but I recommend you speak with an OBGYN who understands whole food plant-based nutrition. Many OBGYNs are now certified with ACLM, which is the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And they would be able to help you way better than this middle school sex ed teacher who makes cookbooks.
Well, to me, that makes a ton of sense, Jane, that when you're eating a clean, whole food, plant-based, anti-inflammatory diet, that you're going to be much more likelihood to be fertile and grow a little one. Jane, here's a question. I'm entering my 60s and I'm postmenopausal. My sex drive has decreased a lot. I can't help but think that this is a natural part of aging. Do you think that's the truth?
I don't know if this person has a partner. Do they have a partner?
Don't know. I don't know.
Well, again, like we've mentioned, we've said a couple times today, is being sexual with your partner is a habit. It's something that you wake up and say, hey, tonight we have a date, 9:30, let's both be there, game on, let's go. And it's just this little expectation throughout the day that you're going to have this moment together. Plan it, make a habit out of it, create it. We're all sexual beings. It's in there. It's in you. Get a half cup of KY. Why not? Throw it in there. Go at it. Astroglide. I would never, ever, 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 ever say coconut oil in your here, but coconut oil down there, fine. There, and I have a whole bunch of lubrication I can recommend, but that is not always the issue for someone. It's just getting game on. Knowing you're a sexual being might even help. Crack the ice, get in there, swim in those waters again.
Nice. Jane, here's a person, they've been plant-based for over a year now. Is there something that you can recommend for hot flashes / night sweats? Thanks. And I don't know how old this person is.
They're probably somewhere in their 40s to 80s.
Yeah.
If they're having this, or maybe a little earlier than that, younger than that. And just like we said with the menstruation stuff, if coming into puberty and getting into your fertile years is like this, and then getting out of it is getting out like this, it's a rough road coming in, and voice changing, pimples, all these things, growing pains, buds in there, getting off all that. It's a bumpy road. And to make it less of a bumpy road, so there's not as many hot flashes or less extreme hot flashes, please don't put any extra hormones in your body, which come from meat and dairy. And if you have a really rich diet, rich meal one night, and they would like to oil and stuff, that also can somehow trigger. I have heard women say that they get a little bit of a warm wind when they do that. Just they get a flash for that. Yeah. So I think having a whole food plant-based diet helps extinguish some of that, but it is also something that won't last forever. So just try to stick with it and see if it helps diminish it.
Yeah. Jane, here's a question. I'll try and tackle this first, and then you can add on. I have a question that I really hope that you would have a suggestion for. What do you do in a long-term marriage, 30 plus years, with a partner who has been ill for many years, so no sex, but also we don't have any intimacy at all, except a quick hug in passing. This has become really depressing since the lockdown, not even seeing the grandkids or other family members since we both have health risks. So my suggestion to this person is I'm going to go back to your 3 suggestions that you gave for adults. So the number 1 is, honest communication, open communication. The second is the different levels of touch. So I think you need to start touching again, even if it's just as simple as putting your arm around each other, holding hands. One of the things that I see Jane, you and Brian doing a lot that I think is great is giving each other like foot massages. When you're watching TV or something, you massage that foot, or you do a little hand massage. But I think those are little small acts of intimacy that can then, lead to something else. Or if not, at least now you're getting that intimacy.
Yeah. Cracking the ice. Crack the ice.
Yeah. Would you, anything you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I think that was well addressed, but also it's awkward. It is awkward, and you make yourself vulnerable. And if you're with your partner, that's the one person that you're closest with. Sometimes, we just hold things against our partners, but that's your partner. Mm-hmm. This is your life. And it might not happen overnight, but just start with, like you said, just start with these little small acts that can lead to something better. And if everyone's physical health is okay and everyone's mental health is able to handle it, then there you go. But couples counseling could be in that recipes too, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. So Jane, this has been very exciting hour.
Hardly talked about any food at all.
But you know what? That's well, I think most people know what we're talking about here with the whole food plant-based diet. But let me ask you this. So what's going on with you, and what's the most exciting thing that you have in your horizon right now that you'd like for people to know about? Any projects you're working on, or?
Yeah, we're. What's really exciting is that, as you obviously know, Mommy and Esselstyn, our mother, Mommy, and I are working on our next book, which is so exciting. After all this talk about women and stuff, I actually am excited to share. The book's working title is Be a Plant-Based Woman Warrior. Be strong, be fierce, be delicious.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so that's all. We have everything due to the publisher, by summertime-ish, and it probably will come out in, we hope, 2022. It'd be so nice to have it be able to be a book around which we could gather with some women live.
Thanks, Jane, for providing such an in-depth conversation with clarity and compassion. Good health starts with honest communication, and I hope this conversation initiates opening some of those doors for you and yours. No doubt, we'll be having more conversations like these in the near future. Next week, we talk health from a different subject, our harmful addiction to salt. I sit down with author Michael Jacobson to discuss his new book, Salt Wars, the battle over the biggest killer in the American diet. You'll definitely want to check it out. Thanks for listening, and take care. Thank you for listening to the Plant Strong podcast. You can support the show by taking a quick minute to follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Leaving us a positive review and sharing the show with your network is another great way to help us reach as many people as possible with the exciting news about plants. Thank you in advance for your support. It means everything. Have you had your own Galileo moment that you'd like to share? What happened when you stepped into the arena and shed the beliefs that you thought to be true? I'd love to hear about it. Visit plantstrongpodcast.com to submit your story and to learn more about today's guests and sponsors. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Carrie Barrett, Lori Kordowich, Amy Mackey, Patrick Gavin, and Wade Clark. This season is dedicated to all of those courageous truth seekers who weren't afraid to look through the lens with clear vision and hold firm to a higher truth. Most notably, my parents, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Cryle Esselstyn. Thanks for listening.